So this is the new JBL Partybox on the go. It's JBL's newest partybox that puts an emphasis on portability, which retails for 300 bucks. Now ultimately, this is a very niche speaker that I wouldn't recommend to just anybody. If you plan on constantly using the included microphone, or plugging in your own microphone, or plugging in your own guitar, then sure. But personally, I just wish JBL did a better job of emphasizing the portability aspect of this speaker. Now, first off, let's talk about the design and build quality of this speaker. Since this is a party box, we're looking at a mostly plastic body and a grill on the front. The speaker doesn't have a fabric-covered body like JBL's other portable speakers. However, the backside of the speaker is padded leatherette, which I think is a nice unexpected touch, which really does help when it comes to carrying the speaker around with its included shoulder strap. Now, even though this is the party box on the go, carrying the speaker around is still quite a workout. Now, it does weigh in at 16.5 pounds, which isn't too bad, but it is rather large with a width of 19.3 inches, a height of 9.6 inches, and a depth of 8.8 inches. For me, the weight isn't a problem. I just feel the speaker could stand to be more compact to make it easier and more appealing to take it on the go with you. However, this speaker is rocking an IPX4 rating, which means a little drizzle or a splash of water won't harm it, and its shoulder strap still has that signature JBL bottle opener for your beverages. Two nice features to have when it comes to portability. Now, the main standout feature here looks-wise is that this speaker does have a built-in light feature, which really does look great. And you have 3 different lighting modes to choose from. But unfortunately, you cannot customize or remotely control the light feature on this speaker through JBL's new dedicated Partybox app at this time, like you can with the Partybox 310, which was announced alongside this speaker. Now, personally, I do think that it would behoove JBL to add app support to the Partybox on the go, because personally, I just find it very odd that this speaker doesn't have app support when the 310 does, and so do JBL's older Pulse speakers. And I really do think that it's a shame, because JBL really does make one of the best looking light features out there. But now we have got to talk about battery life. This speaker has an advertised battery life of 6 hours, but that's with this speaker playing at 50% volume, with this lights feature turned off, and with its bass boost feature turned off as well. Now, at 50% volume, this speaker gets loud enough for indoor use, but with its bass boost feature turned off, the speaker does sound rather flat, making it sound rather underwhelming for its sheer size. Now, the bass boost feature on this speaker has 2 levels to it, and I'm assuming here that most people are going to use this speaker with its bass boost set to level 2. Now, real-world use with this speaker set at 80% volume, with its light feature turned on, and with its bass boost set to level 2, we're looking at a real-world battery life of an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours of playback time, which is not all that impressive considering the speaker's sheer size and weight. Now, you could always squeeze out more battery life out of this speaker if you use it with its bass boost set to level 1 or with this bass boost feature turned off. But if you are going to try to get the most out of this speaker, then you are going to have to sacrifice battery life. And keep in mind, if you use the speaker past 80% volume, then its battery life is going to drain even faster. So even though JBL is trying to market this as an ultra portable party box, the reality is this speaker is going to mostly live on the charger and can only be unplugged for brief periods of time. But now this brings us to actually charging the speaker. The speaker charges via an AC port just like all of the other party boxes. But personally, I just wish JBL also threw in a 12-volt charging port like what's found on the JBL Partybox 310 or Partybox 300, so that you could at least have the option of charging the speaker via the optional JBL car charger, which I think would have come real handy given that the speaker doesn't have the best real-world battery life. And I also think that would have helped cement this speaker as being the ultra portable party box. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, this speaker is using Bluetooth 4.2, but more importantly, it can be connected to 2 devices at the same time, so you and a friend can both be DJ. And when it comes to audio codecs, this speaker has support for both SBC and AAC. But if you want to, you can still use a wired connection with this speaker because it still has an easy to reach 3.5mm audio jack, or you can always play music off of a USB drive by just plugging something into its USB-A port. Or you can always use this USB-A port to charge your own devices, but given that the speaker doesn't have the best real-world battery life, I don't think you want to do that. Now, keeping on the topic of ports, this speaker also has a microphone input and a guitar input. So if you've got either one, you can always just plug them directly into the speaker. But this speaker also comes included with a AA powered wireless microphone, which does have some pretty good range to it. However, just keep in mind, the control knobs on top of this speaker are strictly used for adjusting the echo, treble, or bass to whatever microphone or guitar you might have hooked up to this speaker. The control knobs on this speaker are not used to customize the EQ of your music. But just for example, like right now, we can mess around with the gain of the microphone. We're gonna up the gain right now. Or we can mess around with the echo. See what I did there? Or we can also go ahead and raise the treble on this speaker. Or we can also go and adjust the bass on this speaker. So yeah, just keep in mind the control knobs on this speaker are strictly used for any microphone or guitar you might have hooked up, and they are not used for your music. But now let's talk about listening to music with this speaker. Now, when it comes to speaker setups, this speaker has a single frontward firing 5.25-inch diameter woofer with frontward firing exhaust ports and dual 1.75-inch diameter tweeters. Now, JBL does market this speaker as being a 100-watt RMS speaker, but that's when this speaker is plugged in. When running off of its built-in battery, this speaker is rated at 50 watts RMS. So you are going to get a noticeable performance bump out of it when it's plugged in. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this speaker does have a bass boost feature and there's 2 levels to it. But for this sound test, we're going to be using the speaker with its bass boost turned off and with its bass boost set to level 2. And I'm also going to be throwing in the JBL Boombox 2 as well for the funsies.
I'm counting days, look at these eyes, they're not here to please you. There was a time you could be mine, before all that you put me through. I knew that you were trouble, but I let that you open. I'm living on this bubble and it makes you so mad. You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. You can say hello, but I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. You can watch me go, cause I don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me. Don't need you to like me.
So like you may have just heard, the Partybox sounds very different from the Boombox 2. The biggest sound quality difference is that the Partybox has more bass to it, whereas the Boombox 2 sounds more open. But at the end of the day, the Partybox sounds like your typical JBL speaker, as in it is a little vocals forward. Now, overall, this speaker does have a decent amount of bass, but I can't help but feel that for its size, it is lacking a little bit even when it's set to bass boost level 2. And unfortunately, since the exhaust ports on this speaker are frontward facing, you can't place the speaker up against a wall or place it in a corner to up its bass like you can with other speakers, namely the Boombox 2 or Hyperboom. Again, just like the Boombox 2, the bass on the Partybox really only increases up until around 80% volume. And then from there on out, when you increase its volume, really the mids and highs just get louder, whereas the bass just stays the same. So overall, for its size, I do feel this speaker is lagging a little bit when it comes to bass. Now, when it comes to max volume, again, this speaker does get decently loud and it gets more than loud enough for indoor use. But for its sheer size, it does leave you wanting a little more. Like I mentioned earlier, this speaker does get a noticeable performance boost when it's plugged in. When it's plugged in, it's going to get louder and it's going to have more bass. So just reiterating here, this is a speaker that you're better off just keeping plugged in for the bulk of the time. And if you do plan on using it unplugged, you're only going to be able to do so for a short period of time and at a reduced performance level. But finally, let's talk about pairing this speaker up to other speakers. Now, you can wirelessly pair one Partybox on the go to another Partybox on the go and get left and right stereo sound going. However, you cannot pair the Partybox on the go to any other Partybox speakers. So let's take me for example. If you've got a Partybox 300 or a Partybox 310 lying around, they cannot be wirelessly hooked up to the Partybox on the go. You also can't wirelessly connect a Partybox on the go to any of JBL's Party Boost speakers. So you can't wirelessly connect a Partybox on the go to, let's say, a JBL Boombox 2. Now personally, I do feel that all of this fragmentation does suck, and I would like to at least be able to pair any two Partybox speakers together. Because personally, I do feel that being able to hook up a Partybox on the go to, let's say, a Partybox 310 would be very useful and would also make a lot of sense. So overall, if you're just an average user looking for a large portable Bluetooth speaker to constantly take on the go with you, for me, the Partybox on the go is a hard pass. Size-wise, this speaker is rather cumbersome to carry around, and the audio performance you get out of it while it's running off of its internal battery does leave you wanting more. But the biggest issue is its battery life. With real-world use, this speaker playing at 80% volume, bass boost turned on, and with its light feature turned on, you'll be lucky to hit 2 hours of playback time. But if you are someone that does plan on mostly using the speaker while it's plugged in, and if you really do plan on constantly using the microphone or guitar inputs on this, and only occasionally plan on running the speaker off of its internal battery, then I say maybe the speaker might feel more at home in, like, let's say, a small man cave. But overall, I do feel the Partybox on the go has a lot of room for improvement. First off, there's battery life. I also wish this speaker also had a 12-volt charging port so that you can use the optional JBL car charger with it. I would also like to see this speaker be able to get louder and push out more bass, whether running off of its internal battery or plugged in. And I would also at least like to see app support so that you can customize the light feature on this speaker. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit that like button and get subscribed. It helps out more than you realize. If you want to pick any of the products up mentioned in this video, those will be linked in the description down below, and you can also support the channel by checking out the merch store. But other than that, I'll catch you next time.